Let's go right now to the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee on this day with the Dow down 335 points, Democrat from Massachusetts, Congressman Barney Frank. Mr. Chairman, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Obviously, the legislative process can be an untidy one. There's a lot that's in, there's a lot that's out. Let's talk first about the provisions that are apparently going to be part of the Senate bill that would require large financial institutions to spin off or remove, somehow segregate their derivatives and swap desks. Do you think that is a provision that will be in the bill that you guys then go to conference and have to decide upon, and what's going to happen?
Well, I can't have the conference before the conference. I can't do it unilaterally. I can say this. That issue has to be broken up. There are several aspects to bank derivative dealing. One is the ability of any institution to hedge its own commercial risk. I would expect that that would be something that we would agree should be allowed. That is, banks should be allowed to hedge their own commercial risk. There is also the question about whether or not they should be able to do this on behalf of their customers. And there's an interaction here between that and the Volcker Rule. The Volcker Rule says you can do some things on your own, some things on behalf of customers that you can't do for your own account. One argument would be the derivatives should be treated in that way. And then there's finally derivatives as a separate profit center. So I do think, and Senator Dodd has indicated, that there will be some modification of that. But exactly how much, we'll have to go to conference and discuss.
Which of those are most important to you? Would you personally like to see stay in and versus what goes out?
Well, I hope you won't be offended if I say that until you get a vote in the conference, I really can't negotiate with you.
Yes, sir. Congressman, my understanding is Sheila Bair, Ben Bernanke, and Paul Volcker have all said essentially that if we ban derivatives at the big banks, we then push it out to hedge funds and overseas banks that are nowhere near as well regulated as U.S. banks are. Do you see that as a problem?
Yeah, it has a resonance to me of the old argument, if we outlaw bank derivatives, only outlaws will do derivatives, or outliers. It's the old NRA slogan. That's a very important set of considerations, but I have to tell you again, it would be counterproductive for me to start taking firm positions before. Look, I start with the House bill. That's the bill the House sent me with. On derivatives, I was on the wrong side, the losing side of a couple of votes on the House floor where I tried to toughen derivative regulation, not with regard to whether or not they were in banks. I do think that the climate has changed now. Some of those would have gone differently. But, as I said, there are different versions of this, but there is nothing to be gained. In fact, it would be counter to the process to start gaming the conference before it starts.
Mr. Chairman, though, we're hearing from a lot of people in the market, on the floor, that one of the reasons that people are bailing out of the market today is fear. Not only the fear of a possible contagion from Europe, but the uncertainty about what that financial regulation bill will look like. And as a result of that, they're not confident that they will be able to hedge their own particular bets, and that fear is creating basically a run on Wall Street now. We're down 311 points on the Dow, and the Nasdaq's off 4%. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
That it is important for us to do this as quickly as possible. I hope they get closer today. I've actually tried to help with that. I've talked to Senator Brown. He had some concerns about some particular potential unnecessary negative consequences on some Massachusetts institutions. He and I have discussed that last night, and I sent him a letter. I think we can alleviate those fears. Yeah, I want to move as quickly as possible, and I will say that the President, I am certain now, will have signed this bill well before the 4th of July. As to the ability to hedge your own risk, as I said, I think that's one, without being arrogant, I can say you're going to get agreement on. I think the ability of financial institutions to hedge their own commercial risks will be preserved, whether they're banks or not. And beyond that, I would say that I agree that there's a need for speed. Look, we passed our bill in December. Senate processes are slower. Healthcare slowed things down more than people wanted. But I am certain, and I've cleared my calendar for the month of June, we've already begun these conversations about putting the bills together. And they're not that far apart. They're closer than major bills usually are. I can only assure people that we will have a bill signed by the President well before the 4th of July.
And it will be a bipartisan, it will have some bipartisan support, do you think?
I can't be sure of that. The House Republicans, frankly, have, to my bewilderment, refused to support any form of reform. When we had the last vote in the House on this, their last amendment was an amendment that would have wiped out all forms of reform. They had talked about changing it earlier, but the last amendment they were offered, called the motion to recommit, would have said, let's have no change in regulation. So I really can't predict what's going to happen. In the Senate, it does look as if A handful of Republicans are going to vote for the bill. That's the way it's been, 3 or 4. The main senators, Scott Brown, Grassley, 1 or 2 others. But, you know, bipartisanship is not an end, it's a means. The end is to get a good, responsible regulatory bill with certainty for the market, which they're certainly entitled to have, signed by the president.
Well, Mr. Chairman, regarding this idea of trying to find a way to let banks still be able to hedge their own risks, forgive me, sir, but isn't that what Goldman Sachs got crucified in Washington for a few weeks ago?
No.
Hedging their own risks.
No, there are ways to do that without selling to somebody. What Goldman Sachs was involved with was the accusation that they sold things to people while they were simultaneously betting against them. And we are not talking about banks doing that in that same way. So no, the notion that you can't hedge your own commercial risk, you can buy a hedge that does not involve you simultaneously selling to third parties other than the person you're dealing with on the hedge, the things you're trying to protect.
Let me ask you a double-barrel question, and I trust you just to take the one you want to answer and go with it. Are the bills that are currently being discussed strong enough on capital requirements, number one? And number two, the fact that Fannie and Freddie aren't a part of either of these, can we really say that we've solved the issue of financial re-regulation if we segregate that?
First, on Fannie and Freddie, they were the first major parts of the financial system to be drastically changed. I don't know how people forgot. When I came in to be the chairman of the committee after the Democrats became the majority in 2007, the first thing we did was to pass legislation to give the administration, the Bush administration, the power they wanted over Fannie and Freddie. Using that, which the Senate passed a year later, Bush's Secretary of the Treasury, Hank Paulson, put Fannie and Freddie in conservatorship. They have been more drastically changed than any other part of the financial system, except for those that went out of business. Fannie and Freddie are now under federal conservatorship. They're not operating the way they used to, and as Secretary Donovan has pointed out without contradiction, they're not now costing us any money. The money that they cost us happened before the conservatorship. Now, we do want to replace the financial system for housing that involves the FHA and Ginnie Mae and the home loan banks, and we are working on that. But Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were already drastically changed by being put into conservatorship more than anything else in the system. So I am puzzled by
so
that.
they're reformed.
No, they are reformed in one sense. They are in conservatorship. That's a very drastic form of reform. They are not now doing the things that they shouldn't have been doing before. When we came into the majority, the first thing we did in the House, literally, was to pass that bill. So when you say reform, that means you stop them from doing what they were doing that was a problem. But that happened in 2008 when Hank Paulson put them in a conservatorship. They are now operating in a very different way than they did before. Going forward, they'll be in a different way even more. But yes, the problems they were causing were stopped when Paulson put them in a receivership with the authority Congress gave him.
Ultimately, sir, how much involvement should the U.S. government have in encouraging home ownership in America?
Well, one of my biggest differences with the Bush administration, even with the Clinton administration, was that they overdid that. I have always been critical of this effort to equate a decent home with home ownership. I think we should have been doing more to provide rental housing. My efforts have been to try and get affordable rental housing. I was very much in disagreement with this push into home ownership, and I think the federal government should not be artificially doing that. The goal is for people to have decent housing. And I think beginning in the Clinton administration, but exacerbated by Bush, we pushed people too much into home ownership. We have just passed the bill in the committee to reform the FHA to stop that from happening.
Can I get you to come back? That's very interesting. Can I get you to come back to the thing on capital requirements?
Yes, I appreciate that. In the House bill, we have a leverage cap of 15 to 1. We give the regulators the authority, and I do believe that currently the regulators, we certainly give the regulators more authority on capital requirements. An AIG would never be allowed in the future under our bill to simply go and sell these credit default swaps with no regard for their ability to pay them back. A regulator will have the power to insist that they either stop selling them or raise their capital. But in addition to that, in case the regulators don't do what we think, in an amendment in our bill, we put a maximum 15 to 1 leverage ratio, which is less than half of what some of these people had gone to.
Mr. Chairman, one of the fear factors that's driving the market today is the fact that systemic risk seems to be back on the table, this time emanating from Europe, but the worry is that it will spread here to the United States. Are you confident that the bill that you put in place in financial regulation in its final form, and I know that that's still obviously a work in progress, will be sufficient enough to protect U.S. financial institutions from that systemic risk and give us the mechanism to unwind the too big to fail problem?
Oh, without question. There will be no institutions too big to fail. They will fail. We have worked very closely with Sheila Bair here. We have taken the model, and this is something Hank Paulson asked us to do in 2008, and we should have been able to do it quicker, and then we were bogged down by trying to deal with the crisis. But what we are doing is taking the mechanism that is used for deposit institutions, banks, and applying to all financial institutions. And yes, there will be a capacity for the federal government to step in and deal with the cost of that, but only after the institution dies. There will be no more AIG. That will not be possible. The experience of the Fed first and then the Treasury stepping in under the tarp to keep AIG alive, that will not be possible. There will not be the ability to do that. Okay. And yes, I do believe we have protected ourselves as much as we can domestically. Internationally, unfortunately, we're always going to have to deal with that, but we are able, I think, to deal with the domestic consequences.
Representative Frank, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Frank.